Hello everyone, my name is Ian McNaught. I'm the Strategic Organisational Development Manager at the Scotland Excel Academy. And in this short video, I would like to talk about optimising our innovative work behaviours. So this video complements the previous Stay Connected online workshop. And it's fair to say this is the seven of seven workshops that I delivered in the whole programme with my teammates. And this specific topic starts to bring together components of the previous 6 workshops. It tweaks and optimises some of that content, and it starts to blend it together into something that's quite cohesive. So just bear that in mind if you've attended previous workshops and if you've watched previous videos. Some of the content will be familiar, some will be replicated, and some will actually be progressed a little bit further. So with that in mind, let's have a think about what we actually mean by innovative work behaviour, just so we can get some common understanding. Effectively, as a bit of a definition. So innovative work behaviour is the intentional creation, introduction and application of new ideas within our job roles. It could be at an individual level, it could be at a team or group level, and it could be organisation-wide. And the purpose of doing this is to improve the role performance, the group performance, or the whole organisation. So the emphasis here is our behaviours should be quite applied and quite tangible. We're creating something and applying new ideas within our whole work environment. And that's the key thing to take from that. However, and very importantly, it's much more than creativity. Now, creativity is important and creativity is needed to come up with new ideas or a different way of doing something, a different way of working, a new way of working. But as the definition here says, it's much broader than that because it includes promoting the idea to sponsors, to senior decision makers, and it absolutely includes the implementation of that idea. So we're not knocking the creativity at all, that's essential. But it is easier to come up with a creative idea than it is to then go and actually implement that creative idea, facing the barriers and the challenges we'll face and actually apply that in quite a tangible way that creates some value. So we definitely need the 2 component parts. Just bear in mind that the innovative work behaviour is actually all of that. And to help us think about some of that, there's 4 components that we could think about. It's actually generating the useful or new idea, and clearly that's the creativity part. The search for sponsorship is at 2 levels. It can be looking for the authorization of time, money and people to actually go and explore the idea and to implement the idea. It's also looking for a sponsor at a senior level who will be able to communicate what the idea is to executive teams, to our most senior teams. That sponsorship sometimes will justify the allocation of the resource. It will communicate status updates and snapshots of what we've achieved to date, and where necessary it will defend. So if things are not going quite as well as we had hoped or not as we had planned, then it can be a defence of this is why it's important to pursue this, this is why we should not cancel this activity. Obviously, the 3rd component there is the actual implementation, so the tangible application of exploring that way of working. And then ultimately, it's about recognising that this is an opportunity and or a problem. And the recognition is the important part here. We might not all agree this is an opportunity. We might not all value this course of action. We might not all value exploring this potential way of working. And we might not all agree it's a problem. Or we might simply think there are more important things we should be doing. There are higher priorities. So it's important that we do recognise that what we are about to implement is an opportunity or is a problem. Otherwise, buy-in is going to be a constant challenge. Okay, we talked previously about doing more with less, and the thing I want to bring across here is if we're working hard and we're skilled at what we're doing and we're supported through leadership and guidance, then we can't do more with less. Because the suggestion here is we're operating in an optimal way. We're operating at the top of our game. We're getting the best out of the people. So if we're working in such an effective, ideal, optimal way, how can you get more from your existing resource? Now, on balance, there are few of us who are that good to be working completely perfectly. So in many cases, there are some efficiency gains, productivity gains to be had, and there's better way of doing things. If some of us are challenged doing what we do, then there are ways of improving that to get a higher performance. But to reflect on that though, if we are working optimally at the top of our game, then we can't get more or less. And we need to recognise that if that's the situation that we're actually in. Where we're not working in that optimal way, then if we can develop the people better, more effectively, helping people be more productive and implementing new ways of working that are more effective than our current ways of working, then we can deliver more, get higher performance, get more from the people. So there's a bit of being objective there to think, where are we currently? And the previous component 4, we have to recognise this. We might not all agree we're working optimally, or we might not agree that we're not working optimally. So we need to have that recognition of where we currently are, and then we can build on that, and we'll put the appropriate things in place to make things as good as we can make them with the people we have, the work environment we work in, the workload we've got, and a whole way of working and the challenges that we face. Underpinning innovative work behaviours is transformational leadership, and specifically trust-based transformational leadership. So when we think about this, well, when we think about leadership in this way, we're thinking about people with the formal title and authority of leadership. I've talked in previous workshops about it's not all about the formal hierarchical title. We all can lead, and we all should lead, and there are formal and informal leaders, and I stand by that statement. That's absolutely true. But in this context, we are considering those people with a hierarchical title, the people who have got the authority to change things, who have the influence to make things happen, and should lead the organisation. And if you buy into the followers analogy, then people will follow that leader. If you don't buy into the followers analogy, then this transformational leader will actually be able to articulate the vision of the organisation in such an inspirational way that we are intellectually stimulated and we want to play a part in that. So it is, again, it's leadership, transformational, again at the top of their game. It's a role model type of person, and there is trust there. So even if we think this is going to be very difficult or very challenging, there is sufficient trust that we're buying in to give it a go. So that inspirational communication and being able to articulate an impactful, informative message where people say, I get that and I want to play a part, and don't know how to do that, but we could learn that. It's that type of approach. Obviously, that type of approach means that we need leaders who are supportive, but supportive in a balanced, objective way. Maybe that is facilitation, maybe that is motivation when we need it, maybe that is guiding us to think we're on the wrong path. We have to actually adopt a different approach to that. So it's actually quite an interactive support. It's knowing when to support and when to give autonomy. It's knowing when to motivate and when to realise people are fully motivated and give them a chance to go on with it. And last but not least there, it's then the personal recognition. So those people who are doing the work and achieving things, let's recognise that. Let's not have leaders or others take all the credit, but let's recognise the people who are putting in the effort and doing the work. And that's quite important to get that sustainability and viability of how we're going to continue to work in this way, and the whole organisation be at the top of its game and delivering the best performance it can. All of this is underpinned by the vision, the mission, the strategy, and the operating plan. And as we approach the different activities we're going to do, as we approach using the behaviours we have to be innovative and creative and implement new ways of working, they should be supporting that vision. and the strategy we have and the operating plan we have, because people need to be able to relate to that. We need to be able to relate to that. And ultimately, our activities and actions and our behaviours are going to actually enable the success of that strategy and operating plan. The other element of that, or the other dimension of it, is because we are applying new knowledge to explore new ways of working, then we are enabling, facilitating and driving emergent strategies. If we find a completely different way of working, which is much more valuable than how we currently do things, or we're pursuing that opportunity which changes the game somewhat, then a new strategy or a new component of our strategy can emerge from that. So it's certainly about the current strategy and operating plan, but it's also future looking to where we might head next as an organisation, and that can inform some of that. Still acknowledging everything we do and everything we do should be underpinning that strategy and operating plan. We're thinking about the people here, and we're thinking about the people in terms of that wider network, how we act and interact, what we know, what we share, how we learn, etc. So we're thinking about people's ability, people's motivations, and the opportunity they can either create with approval from the appropriate decision maker, or the opportunity which the organisation can create to give people a chance to demonstrate things, achieve things, grow into something. So we're thinking like that in that actual framework, and we've obviously covered that both in a previous workshop and in some of the videos. I want to link the AMO framework very closely with self-determination theory, because we're talking about people here. So we're still thinking about, do people have the autonomy to do the job we're asking them to do, or we've empowered them to do, or delegated to them? And do people have the competence to do that? And do they perceive they have that competence? And if they didn't, then that's coming back to ability. There's a development need there. There should be a development plan to help people get to where we want them and need them to be. And then the relatedness part of it has got two primary things. One is the social interaction, that people relate to their peers and their team, and there's value in what they're doing, and they can recognise that, and there's that well-being factor, and there's that satisfaction factor. And there's also the relatedness of they understand the part they play as an individual in the strategy and the operating plan. So the different objectives that we have allocated to us as individuals, we understand what that achieves and where it fits into the operating plan, and ultimately by taking a step up, where it actually fits into the strategy. And we should recognise that if we can't satisfy autonomy, competence and relatedness for individuals, then it simply doesn't work. Psychologically, people don't perform, and they don't have good well-being, they're not motivated, and they simply don't buy in and use that discretionary effort to achieve what they might otherwise achieve. And a stage beyond that is, for a lot of people in that type of environment, when we haven't satisfied these three components, they actually can be quite confrontational. They can be quite oppositional. Their behaviours can create barriers. And if they have influence, if we come back to that informal leader, perhaps formal leader, but most probably informal leader, then they can influence the team to actually change the team dynamic, not for the better. So there's two different mechanisms there that I'm trying to bring together, because it's all about the people. It's all about the people's behaviours, to be creative and innovative and actually explore different ways of doing things. And when we say new ways of doing things, new to us, a different organisation may already have done that. That would be nice if we could acquire the knowledge and information and learning from that organisation, and we can actually synthesise it to apply it in ours. But that would be new to us. It may not be completely new. It's not completely disruptive or creative, and that's fine. That's okay. But it's new to us. So we shouldn't get too hung up in that language of new ways of working, new to us, improved ways of working, a way to do things differently, more effectively, etc. Self-determination I've probably covered as much as I wanted to, so I'll just have a wee quick look. Yeah, I guess the autonomy is something that we should think a bit more about. Okay, everyone doesn't want autonomy. Some people want to be managed, like to be delegated their next set of tasks to do. A lot of people actually strive for autonomy. Give me ownership of something, let me be accountable. I'll get more satisfaction from doing that. There's not a right and a wrong, it depends on the people. But if we come back to transformational leadership, then we get to know the people so we can actually lead them in the most appropriate way to get the best from them, the greatest satisfaction for them, hopefully some nice rewards, and the best performance in the wider organisation. Just remember about competence, yes, strongly linked to ability, but not necessarily the same as ability. Some of them might have the ability, but not perceive they've got the competence. So they have the ability, they have the know-how, they have the skills, expertise and knowledge, but the challenge that we're facing, they perceive as so difficult that they can't succeed in their own perception and their own interpretation, and therefore if it's too difficult, they won't engage. And last but not least is that relatedness through contributing to other people, to the group, to the team. There's a wee bit of replication there, but perhaps worth doing. And what underpins that is we need to satisfy these three components to be successful, get the best from people, and to ensure they've got their well-being and they're motivated to actually progressively keep adding and contributing what they can. Okay, if we think then specifically about motivation as a behaviour, because we can choose to be motivated, can't we? Intrinsically, we can choose to be motivated. Whilst it's quite complex, there's some psychological needs in there. There's definitely some social contextual factors from the interaction with people and the interaction with the leadership and the interaction with the organisation. We are normally intrinsically motivated where we have interest in it. You know, our primary driver is we want some reward from that, some satisfaction. We want to play a part. And so if we're thinking about innovative work behaviour, when things will probably be quite challenging, you know, exploration isn't easy. Exploitation isn't always easy either. But exploration isn't easy, and it's risky and it's difficult, and we might not know how to approach it. Then we're looking to have that type of dynamic where people are interested. They've been communicated to by the leader in an inspirational way, caught people's attention, and intellectually there's some stimulation there. I would like to learn that, I'd like to apply that, I'd like to give that a go, I'd like to be part of that. And if we can achieve that, we've got that intrinsic motivation. The other extreme is the extrinsic motivation, and obviously there's not only the two extremes, it's a continuum, so there's everywhere in between. But when there is a need for extrinsic motivation, it's usually for an external reward. I'm getting paid to do my job, so I'm going to do my job. Or it's for social approval, the team recognising that people are investing their labour and efforts to give a fair contribution to the team. So maybe a team member, it might be a bit of peer pressure saying, come on, we need your help here. Or it might simply be to avoid the punishment. I don't want a row. I don't want to be in front of the boss, you know, and being asked why I'm behaving like this. There's a bit of interconnection between motivation and coming back to some of the self-determination theory, because people won't act, i.e. they won't be motivated if they don't think they can achieve effective outcomes. And so whether we are working with team members, peers, or whether we're a leader motivating a team or managing a team, we need to be aware of that. Ideally, to support innovative work behaviours, we need people in that positive environment. And if we can't create an environment which has people there and has them working, contributing and being motivated, then we're going to have other things to deal with, which you can argue would be detrimental. At the very least, it would be a deflection from what we're trying to achieve, and it would detract from our wider efforts. Because if people can't be engaged in that positive motivational way, they will react in more negative ways, opposing what we're trying to do, being resistant, being a bit of a problem effectively. Appreciate that. There is a bit of repetition and there's a bit of duplication because some of these models actually stray into each other the more detail you look at them in. So motivation autonomy, competence, relatedness. We don't specifically talk about motivation there in any detail, but it's certainly a factor there. So it's quite nice to try and connect them as we try and fully understand that innovative work behaviour approach. Okay, so learning as a behaviour. Now, we have talked about learning before, and we have talked about absorptive capacity before in future workshops, in previous workshops and in previous videos. But it's worth thinking about here because it's going to underpin, or it's going to facilitate a lot of that behaviour to try out and explore different things. So it's the acquisition of information and knowledge, and it's about assimilating that, synthesising it, interpreting it, analysing it, and thinking about, can we use this in our organisation? Can we use this with the type of people we have? Will everyone value that? Will they sufficiently value it that they'll give it a go, that they'll buy in and be motivated to go and explore it? And as we do that, we're then bringing to bear what we already know, our existing knowledge, with this newly acquired knowledge that we've synthesised to be fit for purpose in our work context with our people. And we're transforming that combination into something which is of value, which we then can go and exploit. Now, if we can go straight to exploitation and create additional value from it, that's the ideal situation. But that might just be too early for that. We might have to go and explore it. We might have to go and experiment and to try it out. We still need a scope of work which plans out how we're going to approach this. We might have multiple iterations and multiple scenarios, and then we'll regroup and actually go back through, and hence the dotted line is there for another iteration, and we'll think, right, have we acquired any additional learning from this? Can we interpret that and analyse it and transform that into something which is useful, more useful than what we currently have, based upon all the stuff we know and all the new stuff we've acquired? And maybe at that point we're ready to go for the exploitation and embed it as business as usual, because it's now a proven way of doing things. And maybe not, maybe we're still exploring, or maybe we're still optimising, or maybe it's another refinement. So this is quite an interactive cycle. And if we come back to the sponsorship, this is where this might be very important. And we said we'd have done this by March 2021. And actually we're not going to be in track for March. And not only we're not going to be in track, we actually could do with another 2 people. And that'll cost money. So the sponsor might have the job to justify that to the executive team and to concisely and impactfully communicate a snapshot of the performance to date and what's been achieved and what we found out and how we think we might use that. So that sponsorship could be hugely, hugely important at that point. Do we get the additional resource that we've asked for? Does the project get put on hold? Do we continue to have buy-in from the senior people who can make these decisions? So like we said before, nothing of this operates in isolation. And if our team is that very part of that middle image, and we're thinking about all the connections and dependencies and interdependencies, then sponsorship is one of those, an important one, but one of those. And we might not use it very often. You know, when things are going well, that sponsorship will probably be a concise snapshot communication of where we are, what the status is. If things are not going so well, we might have to leverage that much more. But our innovative work behaviour is that behaviour is partly known through our learning what to use when. And then all of this still has to be supporting that strategy and operating plan, or an emergent strategy based on what we're finding out, or we've explored something and we're finding out that things are working differently from what we understood, or the environment has changed from when we first initiated this project, and now we've found that out. Maybe we're back to assimilate, to work towards transformation, targeting exploitation, or maybe we're all the way back to the beginning to acquire. Maybe we've actually discovered as we do this that there is a gap in our ability. Maybe there's stuff that we don't know. So maybe we're all the way back to think about, okay, how do we develop the people? If we have to work in this new way or operate that new type of system or done this stuff that we've never done before, are we back to actually developing the people? And that would then feed into the wider plan. So there would be a journey there that we'd be working through. Okay, we've mentioned exploitation and exploration a couple of times in this video, and we've obviously talked about it before. So it's essential. Both are essential. I'll not go over the detail before because we have covered it before, but no one can do both at the same time. And everyone's got the ability or the potential to do both, but not everyone is motivated to do both. Because when we explore, it's risky and experimental. And when we're exploring, we are not exploiting. And if I want to be judged purely on my performance and achieving stuff, then I'm going to have a very strong bias to exploitation. And exploration for me is just going to be a distraction. If I'm the type of person who's really up for the challenge and doing new things and figuring out new ways of doing things, then I'm going to be motivated to go and explore. There needs to be an understanding then as I'm exploring, I can't be exploiting. And obviously exploration is much riskier. So the individual appetite to risk becomes quite important, and the organisational appetite to risk is essential. If we're very risk averse, we will not want to explore. If we're very risk averse, our executive team are unlikely to support much exploration. And that might be where we need that sponsor to influence people at the executive team level to justify why this is important. We can create value through exploitation. We can create value through exploitation without doing new things if we remain viable in that environment. If a competitor or a peer organisation outperforms us, perhaps funding will go to them in the future instead of us. So we may not be viable, we might not be sustainable. If we are going to do things in new ways and solve some of our existing and future problems, and if we're going to do things in new ways, pursuing new opportunities, then we must explore. If we are not able to do that with our current way of working, then we're not able to do it without exploration. So as a behaviour, both of those are critical with some understanding like we've talked about. Okay, so we've talked about learning as a behaviour, and now in this slide that's replicated, but we're bringing pedagogy into it. So we're bringing a new dimension into this because I want to think about two things about pedagogy. Pedagogy is simply the theory and practice of learning, so it's relevant to learning as a behaviour. But it's also underpinned by the philosophy in an organisation, what we value in an organisation, the vision of the organisation. If we're a very progressive organisation, if we're very aspirational and ambitious, and we want to play a bigger part, then this should naturally fit in. We need to learn new stuff and be able to apply that new stuff to play a bigger part in solving some of the problems and actually delivering some of the new opportunities, some of our community's needs. And that needs inspirational communications from our leadership team. And it actually needs inspirational communications from our team members amongst each other. The intellectual stimulation, you can argue, comes into the learning, but only if we engage in it and only if we're motivated to do it. So there's that element of pedagogy. And if I come to the next slide, there's the actual theory and practice of learning. Now, the actual scope of this is out with this video and the previous workshop. Maybe it's a topic for a future workshop. But in that pedagogy, you know, it could be constructivist, behaviourist, and so on. There's a number of them. That in itself is complex, and it should be the right fit for our organisation or organisations and the people we're working with, or it needs to be a blend. We have to be able to switch between, you know, more than one. There's also the social interaction, the organisational politics, and perhaps also party politics, and certainly the psychological needs of our people. If the learning is too difficult, people won't engage. If the learning is too difficult, people won't be motivated to do it. If people cannot learn or will not learn, we can't apply that new learning to deliver the future things we need to deliver. So again, there's quite a bit of dependency in there. So that theory and practice of learning needs to be fit for purpose in our own context, just like much of what we've talked about. It should be able to support our behaviours, and it should also enable our innovation, both the creativity, thinking up those new ideas, and also being able to implement those ideas in a tangible way and then measure them. Are they successful or unsuccessful? Conduct our lessons learned and regroup. And do we go back through the cycle again, or have we achieved what we wanted to achieve? Have we failed? In which case, what do we do now? Where do we go now? So that pedagogy actually supports all of that. In the theory and practice of learning context, we need to think about what's right for us. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but is it structured, unstructured, and so on. We talked in a previous workshop about work-based learning and transformative lifelong learning. So they are very valid in this context. But think about that large arrow. What about you? What fits well with your work practice? What fits well with the organisation's work practice and values? And what fits well with personal needs, with your personal needs? And what about the wider organisational needs? And for example, some people don't value learning if it's not accredited. I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just making a statement of comments from others. And some people don't believe it needs to be accredited as long as it's useful. Some people want to have a structured taught workshop type of environment. Some people just want to learn by doing, and they'll find out what they need as they realise there's stuff they don't know. Some people will self-direct learn. All of this is valid. What we need to think about in our behaviours is what's right for us, what's fit for purpose for us, what gives us the best chance of success, or what do we believe that to be until we try it or learn something else, or the environment changes, or the people changes. So we think, right, now this is not working so well for us. Let's take a look at it and see if we can optimise this a bit. So my suggestion here about these innovative work behaviours is we really need to focus on these three things. On the people, on the practice, meaning the work practice within the work environment, and in the pedagogy. And make sure we adopt the correct theory and practice of learning that's useful for us. And useful probably is the operative word, or that's the emphasised word. What is useful for us? What's fit for purpose? And let's make that happen. Making it happen is back to implementation, which is why the innovative work behaviours is much more than just that creativity. It's a tangible application. Okay. So this image is starting again with the vision, mission, strategy and operating plan, because that's underpinning our being. That's underpinning why we're here. That's underpinning why we are paid to do the jobs that we do. We've covered, I think, absorptive capacity, exploitation, exploration and pedagogy in sufficient depth at this point. So I want to think a wee bit more about the left-hand side. Now, the part in the middle we've talked about, obviously, self-determination theory, autonomy, competence, relatedness. And closely linked to that, we've talked about AMO, ability, motivation, opportunity, with that discretionary effort, if we're motivated to do so. We've talked a little bit about leadership, informal, formal, and we've talked about transformational leadership. Now that could be at either informal or formal level, but I want to focus on the formal leadership, that hierarchical title, that person with hierarchical power that can authorise resources, money, etc., etc., authorise that new project and authorise exploring that new way of working. So if we think like that, it's worth touching on multi-factor leadership. Now, multi-factor leadership is a model, which is sometimes also called transformational leadership. It's quite a tangible model, which I think could be useful to us in innovative work behaviours, because there are 4 components to transformational leadership and multi-factor leadership. And what these are is, so they're called idealised influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualised consideration. So if we are thinking about people, practice and pedagogy, then this is all about the people. And it's all about how we facilitate progressive practice. Therefore, it's all about how we facilitate innovative work behaviours, that progressive behaviour that explores new ways of working, finds something that's more useful than we have today, and then embeds that in business as usual. And then that becomes our current way of working, and we move on to the next problem, the next opportunity, or we run with that until there's a better way of doing things. The pedagogy, that theory and practice of learning, also plays a big part there, because how are we going to learn new ways of doing stuff? Where are we going to learn it from? Where are we going to learn enough new stuff to allow us to implement or explore implementing something which will be more useful than we've got today? So multi-factor leadership is a topic in itself, so I just want to kind of touch on some of the key things, but hopefully it puts it in the context of all of this. Because for idealised influence, which is the first factor, we need to think about how we establish and maintain trust across the team and across the people. And it actually considers being dedicated to each other. So how we actually really properly trust and support each other. Now, whether that's to be people's hopes, dreams, aspirations, and doing their job better, it's all of that. But if the leader can take that idealised approach and influence those people, then that's one of the components for transformational leadership, which flows into all of this other stuff that we're talking about, and will very positively influence our behaviours. And we haven't talked about culture in this video, but we've talked about culture in other ones. And I've mentioned like Simon Sinek's belief where don't talk about culture because it's not actionable. And if we talk about culture, we often talk about it's the cause of all the problems or it's the saviour of everything. But we can't do anything about culture if we consider it in that way. We can do something about people's attitudes and behaviours, and it's actually people's attitudes and behaviours in a work environment that forms the culture. So we should think like that. We have talked about motivation, intrinsic, extrinsic, controlled and autonomous, at discretionary effort. And the transformational leader can practice inspirational motivation. And we're thinking about here how that vision is used through communication, images and symbols, and how it lets or allows or helps people focus on their work. And it recognises through the action and behaviours of the leader that how people's work is significant and why it's important. And that can unleash that discretionary effort. People feel valued, self-determination, the three components are satisfied, and they're motivated to do what they can. And in challenging situations, that can be essential to achieve what we're trying to achieve, to explore new ways of working. It's all completely relevant. The other factor, or the third factor of multi-factor leadership, transformational leadership, is intellectual stimulation. So this is that transformational leader encouraging people to be creative. So we're back to creativity as a component of innovative work behaviours. Encouraging people to be creative, look at old problems, existing problems in new ways. And the leader needs to create an environment which is tolerant of extreme positions. So maybe we're going to explore something which is quite extreme, but there's tolerance to give us a chance to do that. It might actually work. If it doesn't work, then there's tolerance that we'd all get a kick up the backside, that it's like, well, it was worth trying. What do we do now? What's the next iteration? But it's also about nurturing people to question how we work, to question personal values in a work context, and to question our beliefs, and to do that in the organisation as well. Why do we do things that way? Why are we using that system when this one's more effective, faster, cheaper? It's that kind of thinking. So obviously if we questioned everything all the time, it would be quite unproductive. So it still needs to be managed, it needs to be led. But it's about that transformational leader creating that environment where people will be intellectually stimulated and there'll be tolerance to think, why do we do it that way? If we're having a discussion about this is the way we've always done it here, that is the very opposite of transformational leadership. That's the very opposite of multi-factor leadership. You know, then we've really got a challenge about being able to practice innovative work behaviours, unless that's the very best practice that exists today. And until somebody comes up with it, until someone comes up with a much better way of doing things, then this is the way we'll continue to do it. But that kind of thinking is that embedded practice. That's the best known method of doing things currently. The phrase of that's the way we've always done it around here is normally quite a dismissive one, is let's not bother doing anything new or clever because let's just keep doing what we're doing. So in that context, that's not what we're about here. The fourth factor of transformational leadership through multi-factor leadership is called individualised consideration. And this is where the leader actually shows real interest in other people's well-being. And projects that are assigned to the people are assigned with some awareness of their individual strengths, weaknesses, expertise, development needs. If they need a bit of a stretch, it's not quite bespoke or customised, but it's very much thought about in the context of the individual, of the person. And also, if people are not particularly involved in the group, then that is a way of recognising that and finding a way to get them involved. And why are they not involved? Is it motivation? Is it competence? Is it perception? So it obviously starts to connect things we've talked about before, AMO, self-determination theory. And well-being, as I said, is mentioned there as well. So if we want to get the best out of people, people need strong well-being. So transformational leadership, again, is a topic in itself. This technique through multi-factor leadership, there's actually 7 components in it, but 4 of them are transformational leadership, and that's the only ones I've mentioned in this context. So this actually plays very well into all of this, and it starts to connect some things we talked about before. It still focuses us on people practicing pedagogy. So that's something that hopefully is quite reflective. It's something we can go away and think about. I would be interested to hear from you if you've got further interest in this. There's certainly lots more we can work on. There are other things we can actually pursue building on this. So I've shared a certain depth at the moment, but there's a lot more that we can go and explore together here. And there's a lot of application that we could utilise to be progressive as we go forward. And it is all about our behaviours, both at an individual level, a team level, and at the organisational level. Okay, if we were in a workshop environment, I would ask you to do this exercise. I think it's worth leaving in the video to ask you to think about it. So think about optimising your innovative work behaviours and your peers in your work environment, using force field analysis, using Lewin's force field analysis. So the concept is that black column is what we're trying to achieve, the optimisation of our innovative work behaviours. And any enablers will be the blue arrows acting left to right, so conceptually move that column left to right, and any detractors or the red arrows working in the opposite direction. And what we do is we give ourselves a certain amount of time, or until we exhaust ideas, and we list things that will help us. Now, it could be things you're already doing, it could be things you would like to do, or would think about doing, or things you just thought of. It's all of those. And you do it in the way it works for you. You might list all the enablers or all the detractors, or you just list them as you think of them. Some things might be in both sides of the line, and that's perfectly valid. So you give yourself a certain amount of time, or until you've exhausted ideas, you have a break, you go away and think about it, or you don't go away and think about it, you go in for a break and you come back to it. That might be an hour later, it might be a couple of days later, or whatever. You can do it on your own, and it can be quite effective on your own, but it's usually more effective with a group of people, because you get that diversity of opinions, and you probably have a bit of debate about it as well. But when you get to the point of you can't think of anything else, whether that's over one session, 2 or 15, you've then got something to work from, something which your group of people that worked on this believe this is tangible and substantive. And then you can use what's called dotmocracy. Each person in the group has got 5 blue ticks and 5 red ticks, and you basically identify what you think is important. So I'll put 2 of my ticks in the first one, I'll put 1 tick in that one, 1 tick in that one, and 1 tick in the last one. To me, that's what's important. And you've done the same. And we've done that both for the enablers and the detractors. So now we simply count them up. And it's a form of self-prioritisation where this is what our group thinks is important. And we might go and work on, well, we decide the top 2 things, the top 3 things, depends on the resource we've got and the time we've got. We'll go and work on a number of those things, and that is what we're exploring, either to implement those things or to solve those things for the greater good. Now, once we've done that, we'll have a lessons learned, and we'll decide where we are. And are we ready for implementation as business as usual? Or are we looking at to optimise it further, or we've been unsuccessful or partly successful and we're going to go through another iteration? If we've been successful, we might look at the next 3 things on the list, or we might say, well, hold on, the environment we're in now is quite different now that we've solved those problems, or we've got that new opportunity operational. So we actually might want to go through the exercise again. The next 3 things might come up, or they might be different because maybe our environment is different. Maybe the people are acting differently, their behaviours are different. So it's not a static thing. It's very much dynamic. It's something that we would do routinely. But force field analysis is also very useful for an individual level when there's something we don't know the answer to, we don't know how to approach it, and we're simply scoping out what ifs. That helps me, that would help me, yeah, but we can't do that. Well, why can't we do it? Because this is opposing that. What if we could change that? It's that type of thinking. So it's a simple technique, very easy to remember, but really quite useful. Okay. I've given the URL for the Academy, and I've given you the icon from the homepage. So there's a lot of information in the public domain in the Academy, different from if you're in one of our programs where you've got that secure area, but the public domain information is open to all. We've talked about it in some of these videos and workshops about sharing practice. So the bottom right hand icon there in orange, if you wanted to share some of your practice, you're absolutely welcome to do that. We're happy to post it on your behalf and give you the credit for it. So it's one source of information if you're interested in doing that. Any of the literature that I've used or any of the models I've used, I've given you the references. So it's there should you want to go and explore that, and leave my contact details. If there are future opportunities we should work on together, if there's thing you want to debate and ask about, challenge, I'd be happy to have that discussion. So hopefully I'll hear from you in the future, and thank you very much for your time. Take care.